There has been extensive consultation on the Goodsyard to date. It commenced with some outreach in 2011, which isn't much reported on, and maybe even some local people have forgotten, but there was quite a lot of original stakeholder mapping and initial discussions that took place at that time. The process commenced in earnest in about April 2013, when we had an intensive 2-month period, kicking off with a one-week ideas week, when everything could be thrown onto the bit of paper, nothing was barred, culminating with a process where the master planning team responded to those desires that had been expressed in the first week and stated, along with the developers, the JV, what could be taken on board and what couldn't. So that provided us the compass, really, for meetings henceforth. There's been 14 months of consultation since that commencement and submission of the application in July of this year. There have been roughly 1,400 local people directly involved in that process of consultation, which is quite a lot, even for a project of this size. There have been 14 solid days of exhibition used throughout the different stages of consultation to support it. So that number has appeared quite large. Other numbers that don't hold to the 14 but are interesting are the number of visitors to the website. 45,000 unique visitors since it was established. So that's a big readership, obviously goes well outside the area, but I think it goes to and shows the importance of the scheme. And then another one, maybe not quite so public, but very important to us, was the community liaison groups. About 50 organisations who were drawn from a mapping of about 300 that we thought might be interested, who have been with us all the way through. We've had 9 dedicated meetings with them. So all in all, there's been a great deal of discussion. And I think actually a great deal of what's been said has been taken on board. You can't please everybody all the time, but a lot of what's said was there. The community were very keen to keep the old London Road exactly on its old axis, exactly along the sort of cobbled lanes that it had, with all the turnstiles, etc., kept in place, because people very much considered that to be the real heritage, and that was done, that was achieved. So that route was kept, the covering over it, which everyone thought was inimical to its character, was kept, and the whole consultation strategy around about retail had to be reconsidered. Access to the park, many more points than had originally been considered. Different linkage routes were formed, different stairs were put in. Public toilets might not sound like a big issue, but they came to the fore, they've been accommodated in the site. And last but not least, in the park, there was a lot of conversations about what people would like to see on that elevated garden. So that's just a few of the examples. If you look at the statement of community involvement, you'll see a whole list of them charted through much more detail. One of the interesting things about the site is it sits on the edge of the city and on the edge of Shoreditch and on the edge of Brick Lane, which are different areas with their own tribes and their own value systems, I think. And it is a demand, but it's also something I think that has been recognised by the design team from early on, that they could respond to those different demands. So we don't just end up with a homogenised product that gets laid in the centre of the site, but we try to tune it a little bit as it moves across those different dimensions of the site. So one example is the taller elements of the buildings ostensibly to the western end of the site would have originally been steel and glass. That's the kind of structures that would be normally provided. That's pretty much what you're going to see on the city fringe. But local people were very forceful, very vociferous about not doing that, about not just seeing this as an expansion of the city, and rather keeping to brick as a structure for those, because they saw that as being something that was much more in keeping with Shoreditch and with the Goodsyard itself, and that was done. And that wasn't any small ask. A building of any scale at all, certainly anywhere above 20 floors in brick, is a difficult thing to achieve. So it was hard. It was a hard ask, but it was listened to, and it's been built into the work of the architects. And I think it's something we will see more of in the near future, when we can see more detailed drawings. I think local people will be very pleased to see not only the use of brick, but the detailing of some of the brick. We always think it's important to see dialogue as a continual process all the way through, from the early scoping of who might be interested in the area all the way through to the scheme in use and production. Obviously the conversation changes. In the initial stages it may be that we're looking to build up an understanding of the neighbourhood with input from local people. As we go through the design of the scheme, it's feedback on and ideas given for the design team. In the period of the planning process, quite often it's to do with trying to support the statutory consultation, and in the period afterwards it could be anything from meanwhile use to training and skilling for local people, to access to jobs, or any of a myriad of uses that might take place on the park. And each one of these, I think the JV can tune what that offers to meet these needs. And it's important that it goes on after the planning process specifically, because planning information is just given for retail use classes, A1, A2, A3. It doesn't mean anything to local people. They want to know exactly what type of retail, so they'll want to be involved in that discussion. You can't just tell them about the overall flow plate employment-wise. They need to know how many small businesses are going in there, and over half the number of spaces that are to be provided will be for small businesses, for 1,000 square feet or less. So these elements of information become critical to share at a certain point, but they're not inimical to the planning process, and that's where you have to go well beyond what the local authority requires, I think, and keep that discussion live all the way through the project's implementation. And we'll be doing that here. Well, I think there's a lot of cynicism about development work in any case, and the larger the developer, the greater the cynicism. There's an implicit expectation that deals will be done behind closed doors, and the local people will never be party to those discussions. And that hasn't been the case here. Again, the proof of the pudding is in the statement of community involvement, and the thing that we did right at the beginning was, it must have been about 10 or 12 page charter of what people had asked for, of what the JV said that they would be prepared to look at, and of finally what was actually delivered. And it's a very, very high order of return on that. 80%, something like that, of what was asked for. I'm not saying everything that was asked for was done. We know that there are difficulties about the height of the building. There are difficulties about the heights of many buildings and many development processes, and that will be a subject for discussion. But what that shouldn't do is subvert all the positive discussions that there have been, and all the positive moves that have been incorporated in the design. And they have emanated directly from discussions with local people, and you can track it in this SCI. So I think we've got the proof of that too.